Chapter 3. Men in Black, Lance.
Run!
Shouted Jason at the top of his voice, already some meters ahead of me. I started following him. I looked back and saw the 3 men now following us. They were dressed in black shoes and black suits. Their faces were looking malicious. I looked ahead and increased my speed. With more fear, I could not feel the sprint of my legs, but I felt more air blowing on my cheeks. I caught up with Jason and even overtook him. My speed decreased consequently as a result of the realization that there were now few cars left in front for me to pass through. I got through the last pair of cars which were facing each other from either sides of my body. I now stopped and looked for some stairs to get downstairs, but I didn't find them. Lance then caught up with me and stopped too. There was a wall and no other way to perform the escape. We turned to face the previous direction, and there we saw the big men now walking because they had really gotten us. I lost some bit of fear, but not all of it, when I saw no gun in their hands. The men walked slowly towards us and we began walking slowly backwards. After 2 fearful steps, I hit the wall with my back and the fear multiplied. One of the men started laughing, then began speaking.
"We've got you now, you 2 boys. It's time you get your Pinocchio noses out of our business,"
he bellowed. He threw the van car keys and they landed in the hands of his colleague.
"You go and bring the car here,"
he commanded and turned back to us. "Who are you? What do you really want from us?" I asked and got no reply. The 2 began to come closer in their angry faces. From the corner of my eye, I could see Jason crackling his long-sized fingers, ready to face the opposition. This added confidence in me. I gained courage to beat the men despite their gigantic structure. The first man to draw closer to us in his ugly hippopotamus face threw his arm vigorously towards my face. I crouched down and he missed. The hand of the man kept on going, and it went on to hit Jason on the cheek. Jason showed no identifiable reaction, but just stood as still as a statue. The hand had remained with less power as it had missed its intended target. I bent down to give the man a hard kick on the ankle, and he fell down, laying on the ground with his hand glued to the ankle. As I stood right up after defeating him, the other man immediately punched me in the stomach. I felt my intestines roaring to such a merciless move, and I crouched again, not by choice this time. The man was about to kick me hard whilst I was enduring pain on the floor, but before he could do this, Jason arrowed his right shoulder into his stomach, went forward with the man who hit an open truck which was at a further distance with his back. Jason left the man to recover. All of this happened so fast, within a short space of time. Now, as both the black-dressed men were down, as a runner, I was ready to bolt away. The men would get back on their feet any time soon as we had given them temporary injuries. I started my sprint towards the stairs with Jason behind me. Whilst running, I realized the van was now back in motion, and this time it was moving way too fast. It was facing in the direction we were going and was following us. We continued running for the stairs as it was still far away. As it drew nearer, my heartbeat almost coincided with the sound my legs were making on the floor. The absence of bravery added more to my natural speed and strength. Jason maintained the gap between us. The fear must have been contagious. There was now a little distance left for us to reach the stairs, and so was that for the car to run us over. I realized if we continued running forward, we would not score here. The car would just hit us before we could reach the stairs, or even continue chasing us through the stairs if the driver was willing to sacrifice his life. I then ran 3 steps sideways. I was happy the action was transmitted to Jason, most probably in form of a reflex, as I doubted he had thought of that before running aside too. We heard the car's tires screeching on the floor. The driver had applied brakes. The car fully obeyed this application when its front tires had already gone down the first step, as inertia had kept it propelling forward. It stopped. The driver began opening the door, and during the process, the car began to go down the stairs on its own. It had been hanging and was now setting itself free. The driver could absolutely do nothing about it except just looking downwards as the car was taking him there. The view mirrors of the car were compressed by the walls as the gap between them was not meant for cars to pass through. The car continued through the stairs, reached the 4th floor, and crashed on the wall. My brother and I followed the route the car had taken, and we went on till we reached the ground floor. We didn't wait on spot where the crash had taken place, as we were afraid of the big men we had beaten, who could be on their feet by this time. We made it out of the building, and the exit gate was closed to trap the men inside. I pressed on 277 on my phone to dial the police department. They arrived in no time, invaded the building, and came out with the 3 men cuffed. I was glad to see the man who had crashed alive. Although he could kill, I just felt like he didn't deserve to die. We told the police everything that we had gone through as they kept on asking questions. What had happened was a lot. They now turned to the 3 men who could not let any word pass out of their mouths through questioning only. To me, this was not such a major surprise. Neither was it to Jason nor to the police. In addition to being questioned, the men would obviously require some form of beating or threatening for information to be obtained. This is what was done in most of the cases whenever criminals could not be generous enough to give out what they knew. However, sites for the public such as parking buildings were not a perfect spot for these underground actions. Therefore, by virtue of this, the men were offered seats in the police Ford and were driven safely to the police station. Jason and I were left behind. One would think maybe we were too young to experience what was going to happen there, but this was not the case. As police assistants, we were restricted from following up their whereabouts so as to assist them more. 2 groups of law enforcers would make the law more alive if they were in different places at the same time than if they walked together as one. This would also apply to any group of law enforcers out there. "Do you think the truth shall be told?" I asked my brother hopelessly.
Always,
replied Jason positively.
trust the process.
For a day, we had progressed a little bit well. The police with 3 men in custody, all because of us, that was a little bit of success. But there were still some information to be dug out and exposed from these men, only if they could speak out. But one thing for sure is that they wanted us 6 feet under the ground. My brother and I had to be careful. We had to seriously watch our backs. For a couple of minutes, we sat in town, just watching people around and thinking of our next step. I suddenly received a call from one of the officers who had been torturing the culprits in order to obtain information. "Anything, sir?" I asked.
"Yes, we've got something."
The police officer explained everything over the phone. As I was communicating with him, Jason was widely opening his ears, with his head towards my phone, not willing to miss any word. After the end of the call, he curiously asked what the conversation had been all about. I told him that we had to proceed on to the 6th floor of OTEL Hotel. One of the 3 men had exposed that there was a man behind all their negative activity, and they had been doing him some favors for a couple of pennies. He had breached out some information that they usually met this man on a certain room on the 6th floor of the OTEL Hotel. We both stood up and began our short journey, eager to know what was awaiting us there. From where we had been taking a rest, the OTEL Hotel building was in the scope of our sight. It was a 5-star hotel, beautiful on the outside and obviously with the richest individuals inside. It took us only a few steps to get there. As we entered the building, we felt a change in atmosphere. The air inside was a bit cooler and the environment just felt expensive. The reception was professionally decorated, and I wouldn't want to mention a lot about the girl who was at the reception. Everything was just classy. We had to go up the 6th floor and we got into a lift that would take us there within a couple of seconds. The doors of the lift began closing swiftly after entering, with only the 2 of us in it. This would earn us some privacy. Just as the doors were only left with a little gap to get into contact with each other, which would signal the lift to begin elevating us upwards, some fingers got into their way and they began repelling. As the doors were opening, I was looking forward to seeing the owner of such fingers, for how unusual it was for somebody to just interfere with the lift's operation only to join us. A short individual popped in, with half of his face covered in beard. We could barely identify his mouth. I looked at Jason, and he looked back. We were probably thinking the same thing. The doors finally shut, with no interference this time, and the lift got into motion. The man who had joined us began sounding his right foot on the floor, and he was looking upwards. He was right in front of us. It looked like he was out of time. The lift reached the 6th floor and the doors opened. We all exited. The short dude began walking quickly in front of us, taking larger steps forcefully despite his natural short pace. My brother and I were heading to the 5th door of this floor, but so was this little rascal. He made it first to the door, opened it, entered, and began slamming it shut.
Hey!
Jason shouted, but his word was received by the back of the door. The man had already gotten inside. We reached the door and I started knocking. No one responded. I tried opening, but the door was already locked. "Hey, this is YCI. You need to open up." Zrenia. But we were answered by silence. What do we do now?
Well, you know what, Lance. This man clearly heard us but decided to ignore us. He's up to something. He knew we were coming. We might need to break in.
No, let's play smart. Let me go get the keys for this damn room. I insisted on my brother who wanted us to do things the hard way. You wait here. I made it quick to the reception, but when I got there, getting the extra pair of keys took much of my time. Hierarchy had to be considered, and we wouldn't be getting the keys straight from the receptionist. Jason became impatient and came down to check up on me. I updated him on what was going on. As we were waiting for the keys, the short rascal popped up. He had left the room and was exiting the hotel. I truly desired to follow him, but this was not what we had been assigned to do. The man went farther, beyond the reach of my eyes. Meanwhile, the extra key for the room was now handed to me. As YCI of the nation of OTEL, our badges allowed us access to everywhere we deemed necessary for investigations. For example, this particular room, in which we were certain that someone was really inside but had decided to ignore us. We went back to the 6th floor, got to the 5th door again. I placed the key in the hole and turned it anti-clockwise to unlock the door. I pushed the door open and it went on with a squeaky sound. I saw a man seating on a chair facing the opposite direction. His head was a bit slant. There was a big hole through his head and down went on a red-colored liquid, specifically blood. That must have been a dead body. A bullet had been pierced in someone's head.